And blessed to be with you, KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. We had scheduled our friend Phil Hawkins. We will get to Phil coming up. Of course, a big event coming up for the veterans. We'll hear what Phil has to say about that. In addition to that, we are waiting for the president to speak. Until he does so, we'll stay live with you right now. We go to Hank in Boise with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. I think it is significant that the shooter was a Warren voter. If you believe in the Democrat worldview or see it, in other words, the planet is going to end in 10 years because of man-made pollution. You have no future, no job because America is inherently free. Your whole view is espoused by hatred for this country because this country was founded on a ripoff. This is a Democrat Party view. If you imbibe in Democrat politics, you're always going to be full of hate and you're going to be full of despair, and there's no future and no hope. That seems to be the constant message or refrain that you get from your.
All right, Hank, hold that thought. If you want to hang on, the president speaking right now on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning. My fellow Americans, this morning, our nation is overcome with shock, horror, and sorrow. This weekend, more than 80 people were killed or wounded in two evil attacks. One Saturday morning in El Paso, Texas, a wicked man went to a Walmart store where families were shopping with their loved ones. He shot and murdered 20 people and injured 26 others, including precious little children. Then, in the early hours of Sunday morning, Dayton, Ohio, another twisted monster opened fire on a crowded downtown street. He murdered 9 people, including his own sister, and injured 27 others. The First Lady and I join all Americans in praying and grieving for the victims, their families, and the survivors. We will stand by their side forever. We will never forget. These barbaric slaughters are an assault upon our communities, an attack upon our nation, and a crime against all of humanity. We are outraged and sickened by this monstrous evil, the cruelty, the hatred, the malice, the bloodshed, and the terror. Our hearts are shattered for every family whose parents, children, husbands, and wives were ripped from their arms and their lives. America weeps for the fallen. We are a loving nation, and our children are entitled to grow up in a just, peaceful, and loving society. Together, we lock arms to shoulder the grief. We ask God in heaven to ease the anguish of those who suffer, and we vow to act with urgent resolve. I want to thank the many law enforcement personnel who responded to these atrocities with the extraordinary grace and courage of American heroes. I have spoken with Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, as well as Mayor DeMargo of El Paso, Texas, and Mayor Nan Whaley of Dayton, Ohio, to express our profound sadness and unfailing support. Today, we also send the condolences of our nation to President Obrador of Mexico and all the people of Mexico for the loss of their citizens in the El Paso shooting. Terrible, terrible thing. I have also been in close contact with Attorney General Barr and FBI Director Wray. Federal authorities are on the ground, and I have directed them to provide any and all assistance required, whatever is needed. The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul. We have asked the FBI to identify all further resources they need to investigate and disrupt hate crimes and domestic terrorism, whatever they need. We must recognize that the Internet has provided a dangerous avenue to radicalize disturbed minds and perform demented acts. We must shine light on the dark recesses of the Internet and stop mass murders before they start. The Internet, likewise, is used for human trafficking, illegal drug distribution, and so many other heinous crimes. The perils of the Internet and social media cannot be ignored, and they will not be ignored. In the 2 decades since Columbine, our nation has watched with rising horror and dread as one mass shooting has followed another, over and over again, decade after decade. We cannot allow ourselves to feel powerless. We can and will stop this evil contagion. In that task, we must honor the sacred memory of those we have lost by acting as one people. Open wounds cannot heal if we are divided. We must seek real bipartisan solutions. We have to do that in a bipartisan manner that will truly make America safer and better for all. First, we must do a better job of identifying and acting on early warning signs. I am directing the Department of Justice to work in partnership with local, state, and federal agencies, as well as social media companies, to develop tools that can detect mass shooters before they strike. As an example, the monster in the Parkland High School in Florida had many red flags against him, and yet nobody took decisive action. Nobody did anything. Why not? Second, we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence. We must stop or substantially reduce this, and it has to begin immediately. Cultural change is hard, but each of us can choose to build a culture that celebrates the inherent worth and dignity of every human life. That's what we have to do. Third, we must reform our mental health laws to better identify mentally disturbed individuals who may commit acts of violence and make sure those people not only get treatment, but when necessary, involuntary confinement. Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun. Fourth, we must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process. That is why I have called for red flag laws, also known as extreme risk protection orders. Today, I'm also directing the Department of Justice to propose legislation ensuring that those who commit hate crimes and mass murders face the death penalty, and that this capital punishment be delivered quickly, decisively, and without years of needless delay. These are just a few of the areas of cooperation that we can pursue. I am open and ready to listen and discuss all ideas that will actually work and make a very big difference. Republicans and Democrats have proven that we can join together in a bipartisan fashion to address this plague. Last year, we enacted the Stop School Violence and Fix NICS Acts into law, providing grants to improve school safety and strengthening critical background checks for firearm purchases. At my direction, The Department of Justice banned bump stocks. Last year, we prosecuted a record number of firearms offenses. But there is so much more that we have to do. Now is the time to set destructive partisanship aside, so destructive, and find the courage to answer hatred with unity, devotion, and love. Our future is in our control. America will rise to the challenge. We will always have, and we always will, win. The choice is ours, and ours alone. It is not up to mentally ill monsters. It is up to us. If we are able to pass great legislation after all of these years, we will ensure that those who were attacked will not have died in vain. May God bless the memory of those who perished in Toledo. May God protect them. May God protect all of those from Texas to Ohio. May God bless the victims and their families. May God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There we have it, the President of the United States on KIDO Talk Radio urging red flag laws to be passed nationally. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. We will take your calls next. Stay with us. Rolling on the right side, coming up, Tom in Meridian, Hank in Boise, and your calls, your reaction to the president's speech calling for red flag laws. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. While we get the phone lines loaded up, we go to our great friend, patriot, veteran, community activist, a gentleman who continues to give. Phil Hawkins joins us now to talk a little bit about a very special event coming up. Phil, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Kevin. This is such a wonderful program. It's the Spirit of 45, which means that we try to remember our World War II veterans who served, and we will not never forget the Spirit of 45 really represents the end of World War II. And what we try to do is nationally, every Sunday, the closest to August 14, 1945, there's a ceremony. Now, our ceremony for our local area will be at the cemetery in Conabin area at 10 o'clock. And we invite all veterans, their families, especially World War II veterans. We're concerned about, as you know very much, Kevin, the older generation, our greatest generation, is passing away on us. And so we want to honor them and their families with this ceremony. And it will start at 10 o'clock. It's a short little ceremony. We just ask for them to come and enjoy some cake and just visit and talk about their experiences during World War II, whether it was on the home front as one of our wonderful spouses and their families as they supported our veterans who fought in World War II and kept this great nation free.
Phil, it is so important. So if people would like to attend the ceremony, is there a website, more information, or is it just you and me?
Well, right now, probably easiest just you and me, and of course James Earp from the cemetery. His group has got more information too. If people want to call James or his team at Veteran Cemetery, with the program starting out, we always do this on Sunday, so it makes it a lot easier for a lot of folks to get up there at the cemetery. And the Conabarian area is real easy to get to. It's very comfortable. They put up some wonderful canopies to protect the folks, and it's just a really, really nice ceremony. Another thing Kevin is really trying to do with this project is to get the families to have photos of their veteran who served in World War II or the spouse who was on the home front doing the things to support our nation. They saved our nation. Oh, my gosh, if it hadn't been for the greatest generation of World War II, we would not be here today.
You're so right, Phil. We can't thank them enough. What time does the ceremony start on Sunday?
Thank you. It starts at 10, and look for about a 45-minute program. I don't look for it to be any longer than that, and it's just a really nice social event. there's a flag ceremony. There'll be a rifle salute. There'll be that common stuff to honor. But the main thing is to invite as many veterans and their families as possible that would like to come to the ceremony.
And we will remind people all week long, Phil Hawkins, safe travels home. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your continued service. God bless you, my friend.
God bless you. Be safe, bud.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Our great friend Phil Hawkins, reminding us of the importance to honor people now more than ever. Back to your phone calls, your reaction to the president. Hank, welcome back. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. I think there might be some merit to the red flag laws, but background checks. If we did away with them, I don't think that would change one thing or another. I mean, we started the background checks going back to the modern era of the shooting. Starts with the 1966 shootings at the Texas University clock tower back in when we had our first mass shootings, and I don't see where there's a lot of these people that did the shootings, even the Aurora Theater, passed background checks. You a lot of times we parrot things out without necessarily looking whether or not what the objects that we're doing is actually really works. And the same thing with the taunting of taking away guns or taking away, the Trump mentioned the thing taking away bump stocks. Outside of giving a whole bunch of firearm violations on having bump stocks, I don't think that necessarily taking away bump stocks is necessarily going to change anything. I know it feels good, touchy feeling, and you got to show that you're doing something about it. But I think that the problem is deeper in the culture. We got one party in this country, the Democrat Party, that preaches hatred and calls people racist and takes away people's rights because they don't necessarily agree with them, and preaches this stuff. You have right now in the current polls, only 22% of Democrats are really proud to be Americans.
Well, that is disturbing, Hank. Thank you for the call. And as we've talked about all morning long, we should be honoring the victims. We should be talking about them as opposed to politicians on both sides giving us platitudes about what should be done. We can't wave a magic wand. The president earlier, if you missed it here on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, saying violent video games, white nationalism, coming together, background checks, tying it to immigration reform. These are the solutions that the president just said right here, and red flag laws, which means if you have a concern about a neighbor, a coworker, you can contact the police without due process, and they can come in and confiscate those people's weapons. Better safe than sorry? Tom in Meridian with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tom.
Yes, Kevin, good to talk to you. Every time we have a mass shooting, then we talk about gun control and this sort of things, and the Republicans and the right always say that we want to take away all your guns. I don't think that's right. I think we need some reasonable regulations on who can get a gun. They want to blame it on mentally challenged. Well, I don't think anybody that is a mass murderer doesn't have some mental problems. But I'm afraid that there's a big percentage of our population that would fall into that, and I don't think you'd really restrict the guns. I think what we need to do is have the CDC, or it was sponsored with members from both political parties, look at the success that they've had worldwide in other countries where they have come up with some reasonable regulations on gun control. And that doesn't mean take guns away. But just mental health is not going to solve the problem. And you say that the only thing that prevents an injury or an accident is a well-armed private party that has guns. Texas probably has the most people with guns, and yet these accidents, this last one happened in Texas. They didn't shoot him. I don't think that's the solution, but I do think the CDC ought to get involved in regulations. We ought not limit it to just mental problems. I agree, that's one of them, but there's a lot of other things we could do and a lot of other things other countries do. Anyway.
Well, before you, wait a minute, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but like what? what would be something, because we're having everybody have solutions right now. What would be something, Tom, that you think other countries have done that we should do here?
They've limited the capacity of magazines. They've limited the automatic weapons. They've got rid of bump stocks. I think, and I haven't researched these totally, but I do know that of all the countries, the U.S. has the majority of gun deaths except for Brazil. They are higher than any other Western nation. So there's others that are doing things, and that's why I say I think the CDC, somebody that's impartial, ought to review these things and come up with it. I don't think I'm qualified to do it, but I don't think it's just mentally challenged people either.
Tom, thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for my comments, or letting me say my comments.
Your comments are always welcome, brother. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio time, 8:30. Good morning, Dave. And as we've been sharing with you, there are so many heroes. One Army specialist, Glenn Oakley, that heard the gunfire and ran in to save little children. Here's his thoughts.
All I thought of was how I would want another man to react if I had a child and I wasn't around my child at that time. So I just did what I would want another person to do for my children.
There you have it, running in, credited with saving many children's lives.
I'm looked at as a hero for it, but that wasn't the reason for me. I'm just focused on the kids that I could not get and the families that were lost, because it hurts me like I lost, like they were part of me.
Part of me, total strangers. The true definition of being an American. I think we could all take a lesson from Mr. Oakley. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And don't forget Dave Ramsey today, noon to 3, followed by Sean Hannity, who will have more on this event, this tragedy. How do you really define it? An event, a tragedy? Take more of your calls on the shooting in Dayton, Ohio, which hasn't gotten a lot of attention in comparison to what's happening in El Paso, Texas. Beto O'Rourke and others going after the president. You'll hear from them. Does that really aid the national conversation? I don't think so. The president earlier today saying this on KIDO Talk Radio.
We are outraged and sickened by this monstrous evil, the cruelty, the hatred, the malice, the bloodshed, and the terror.
The terror, indeed, in a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and a nightclub in Dayton, Ohio. Again, one can't blame the president for making a bad call, but when he said Toledo as opposed to Dayton, you could tell that the emotion had gripped him, had taken over. Now is not the time for emotion. Look at all the mistakes that have happened in world history. People have been buoyed by emotion, have been captured by emotion to swing one way or the other. The president did say red flag laws, which has been a contentious issue here in the state of Idaho. Oregon currently has red flag laws, and if you don't know what that means that if you have an issue with someone or you believe truthfully that they are a menace to society, that they don't have all their mental capabilities, that you can call the police. They will do a wellness check, possibly taking their weapons. Again, gun rights groups have an issue with this at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. One thing that we have been talking about all morning long, we seem to have already forgotten about the survivors, right? The victims. Couldn't we have a way to remember the victims without one side blaming the other? Now, the president has called for universal background checks. Would that have stopped this shooter, this 21-year-old in El Paso, Texas, who, in fact, got his gun legally, an AK-47, legally? Now, people are going to say, why do you need an AK-47? Why do you need expanded magazines? Why do you need any of this in America today? All it leads to is violence, of deaths. But of the thousands and perhaps millions of people that own these weapons, they act responsibly. Should their weapons be taken away because of these tragedies? Would that prevent the violence?
The First Lady and I join all Americans in praying and grieving for the victims, their families, and the survivors.
Now, the shooter in Dayton was killed by police, 24-year-old who killed his own sister, killed 9 people, several injured, but killed his own sister. Sometimes we have to wonder, why do people do these things? The president blamed violent video games. The president said that our society has become too polarizing. Can we really stop folks who have a mission to do this? I mean, the guy in Texas drove 10 hours. And as we said earlier, you would think that in 10 hours, some type of phone call, some type of rational thought, some type of divine intervention would have taken over and caused this young man to think this might not be the best course of action. The president saying, we are sickened by this monstrous evil. Really? Is there anything that anyone can do about it? Right? Is there really anything that anybody can do about it? By the way, 22% of millennials in this new report say they feel alone and not loved. What does that mean to all of us? More of your thoughts coming up. Do want to remind you, you're always free to speak with us. I'm actually holding for Jared Halpern of Fox News Radio. If you're wondering why we haven't gone back to the phones, we will. But, you know, when we have a situation like this, it's very easy to play the clips and get the reactions. One thing we haven't done this morning is the shots of the gunfire. You'll probably hear that from Glenn and Sean and maybe Lars. But with respect to the people that have lost loved ones, as we said, when you're confronted by anger, take this into account. Those of you that have been parents, those of you that have had the joy of giving birth, think about the young mother who protected herself and protected her loved one along with the husband. They were human shields to protect a 2-month-old baby. That gunman took their lives. That little baby is alive right now in Texas. So when we hear people calling one person a racist, one person this, that, and the other, political parties should be null and void right now. I think of the parents, and what would you do? What would you do if you were confronted in that situation? Tea Party Bob joins us now, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. Sad day, but, you know, as Americans across the country mourn those who were killed and wounded in these horrible shootings in Dayton and El Paso, it's time for us to look into the real reasons for these horrible acts of violence. You know, since Roe v. Wade, we've educated our children that it's okay to kill millions of unborn babies. We've done nothing to help those who are suffering from mental illness except to give them more and more psychotropic drugs. We allow doctors, along with drug companies, to profit from handing out opioids like they're candy to thousands of patients.
Well, let's go back. Let's address the mental illness question, because if you ask anybody in law enforcement across the country, they will tell you that is the number one issue impacting us. And we can go back to President Reagan getting rid of the institutions. I mean, the blame game continues, and I can hear the emotion in your voice. You know, that maybe the skeptic or the cynic in me thinks that everybody's going to beat the drum, we're going to do something. But personally, I don't believe that universal background checks are going to help. I think both sides are going to dig in, and you're going to have people fighting back and forth on this, as opposed to solutions. When you were in the boardroom with Donald Trump and other big hitters, sometimes business people understand compromise much more than politicians, because you have to get something done. Wouldn't it be nice if our elected officials understood that?
Well, they don't seem to get the idea that if you continue to blame the other guy for the problems, you're never going to reach a solution to them. You know, it's really been a one-sided commentary, particularly by the political entities and by the press. You know, Hollywood is also another part of it. You know, we have a cultural society that thinks it's okay for violence. It's okay for them to do these things. And that's the way our kids are raised nowadays. The political rhetoric that's being spewed by many of the elected officials who continually criticize anyone who does not believe as they do, they can't seem to pass the laws necessary to fix the problem. You know, the elected officials that are blaming the president for these horrible acts of violence are seizing the moment to gain notoriety to promote themselves, even though they have been a part of the problem and not the solution for many years. We've allowed these problems to develop in our culture and have done nothing to fix the root cause of the shootings. We hear from the left that we need to confiscate guns, yet we have no basis for their argument. As the guns do not kill people, it's the people who kill people, and the mentally distraught who commit 90% of the violent acts. This is not a racist problem. It's a cultural problem that has been festering and we've allowed the press to continue to create this problem over the airwaves. When does it stop?
Well, on the other hand, you take a look at how do you stop these folks? How do you stop people that are lone wolves that decide to do this, whether it's the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, whether it's Dayton, Ohio, whether it's in California, whether it's in Texas, waving a magic wand? What do you say to people that are carrying weapons legally? Now they're vilified.
I'll tell you what, I said it yesterday on our Facebook, and I'm going to say it again today. The only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Seen it too many times. You read about it, not enough in the papers, but that's what we need. It's not less guns. It's probably more guns that would save us from all these problems. And by the way, thank Tom for his comments, but he is so wrong about gun deaths in the U.S. We are number 11. And when you look at the countries that have the most gun deaths, these are the ones with the dictators: Honduras, Venezuela, Swaziland, Guatemala, El Salvador. I mean, these are the problem places, the real problem places. But I'll tell you, we're getting closer to that as we continue to see what's going on here. And if the divisiveness does not stop soon, these problems are going to continue to fester, and we're going to have more problems.
Tea Party Bob, JumpStatePatriot.com. Thank you. And here's the survey I was looking at. 3 in 10 millennials say they always or often feel lonely. 3 in 10. Compared to 20% of Generation Xers, 15% of baby boomers. When you think about this is a recent poll by YouGov, a polling firm and market research company, found that 30% of millennials feel they're lonely. Here you have something else. 27% feel they have no friends. Millennials 23 to 38, the prime years of life, of career, of opportunities to start families before your joints start to ache, right? How can we reach these folks? Not to get touchy-feely. Look at the amount of people taking their own lives. Idaho, one of the states, unfortunately, leading the nation in that. We are so blessed, those of us that have our health. You want to not feel sorry for yourself? Go to a hospital. Go to a homeless shelter. Go to somebody who has a sickness and has a beautiful family, and they're going to be lost. Boy, you talk about shaming yourself into doing something good. Saying, gosh, I've been blessed. What did I do with my blessings? You need somebody. And not to go Marianne Williamson on you, like we talked about earlier, but there has to be a cultural shift. How many times have you taught your child, or this lesson has been taught to you, how bad do you really want something? Is it really worth it? And I think that's where our politicians have to come in. Doug and Steve and Jeff, you're next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Blessed to be with you. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Keep it here throughout the day for continued coverage, your reaction, your voice with Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, and Lars Larson. Doug in Mountain Home, thank you for your patience. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin. Hey, man, this is really something. But the way I look at it, Kevin, the media, I'm not even going to call them news. The media is the one that escalates all this stuff. Where it comes from, as far as I'm concerned, Kevin, it comes from Satan. I mean, it comes from, they've kicked God out of our country a long time ago, and it's just going to get worse and worse. You talk about, you were talking about the millennials, not having any friends, feeling lonely. You ever seen the millennials? Most of them, all they do is stare at their phone. They don't even know how to socialize, Kevin.
Well, and that's the issue that, Doug, we were talking about, that they can communicate effectively on the phone. I can remember, and I shared this program with a lot of people, this thought. I was talking to a lady at Barnes & Noble's 3 or 4 years ago, and she said, these folks can't talk, but we've got to figure out how to save these folks 23 to 38. They can form relationships with people all around the world with the games, but they can't say hello to their neighbor.
No, you're right. And I say it's God is the only answer as far as I'm concerned. And I know if you got Steve coming up, he's just going to laugh at me. But
no, it's not that, Steve. No worries about it.
You read, I'm not worried about it anyway, but you read the Bible, the Apostle Paul talks about, we don't battle against flesh and blood, Kevin. We're battling against spiritual principalities of the darkness of the world. Satan runs this world, period. And it's just, I don't understand why we got to have, I'm a gun owner. I will fight to the finish for gun rights. But I don't understand why we got to have military weapons either. But you give these guys 1 inch and they're going to take a mile, and that's what they're waiting for. I've watched it all my life. That's why we still have military weapons that you can buy. But the other thing is this guy that done the shooting in Texas, didn't he just lay it down and they captured him? He ain't dead, right?
The one in Texas, correct. The 21-year-old. Doug, you remember 21. How in the world could you be thinking about driving 10 hours, killing people at the age of 21? You would have other things to do in your life, I would hope, more perspective.
Yeah. But if you'll listen to that voice in your mind that's telling you to do that, guess who that is? That's Satan. And he's here to do that stuff. Then it's working. They're doing it. He's doing it. People are listening. People listen to everything that is good. Anything that is bad does not come from our Lord Jesus Christ, period.
Doug, thank you for the call. God bless. Traffic and weather together. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dave. And repeating one of our top stories, the Mexican government now promises legal action over the El Paso shootings. We'll have the details for you in a minute. Steve in Meridian with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Steve.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. Thanks for squeezing me in. Great show. Love the last caller. I happen to be a Bible teacher, so of course he's preaching to the choir. I like what he's saying. But unfortunately, a lot of people are playing checkers when this is a chess game. Gun control is not the answer. It's really a spiritual problem of evil people that have weak minds and there's no love or common sense in their heart. And so what we need to do to combat that is not merely change the laws or argue politically or blame our awesome president. Rather, we need to spread a message of deliverance and hope and how to get God involved in people's lives. And that does not mean, just improving our culture, because evil is always going to be here. It's we live in an imperfect world. There's trouble and we have conflict. And so the answer is do what you can for yourself and try to help as many other people as are willing and humble to learn how to also protect and improve their lives and how to recognize and deal with evil. So, Kevin, appreciate your heart in this segment today. It was awesome. Like the united front of a lot of awesome-minded people who recognize the evil behind the loser pawn in Texas and the pawn in Ohio were just being used to foment the racism issue and the gun control issue and to blame our president. And we can see past that, and we're going to vote for him anyway because he's the better choice by far. And ultimately, that's the chess game: is one evil in one spot is planted strategically by evil to cause a bigger fire, and we're not going to let it spread. We're going to recognize it for what it is and impact our own sphere of influence in a local level that can cause a ripple effect around the world. But where there's a vacuum of light, darkness will enter. So we need to put light out there, Kevin. Thanks for letting me jump in. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
God bless, Steve. We appreciate you. And don't forget to keep it here throughout the day. Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Lars Larson will have the latest. And if you need a little break from the action, Dave Ramsey, well, he'll teach you how to take better care of your family and your finances. But again, this is where we pray and we thank God openly for our great country and hope that politicians come to some solution over this senseless violence. We'll have more for you tomorrow morning, but don't go anywhere. Glenn's ready to go. We're always here for you. God bless, Ray. Great job as always.